It's wonderful to see everyone. It is very bright as well. As my colleagues know, I have a dislike of podiums, so I'm going to speak to you straight on today. And again, thank you for coming and for your questions and engagement through the morning's panel. You'll have a little bit of time, I think, to ask some questions of me and my colleagues after I finish my report. So let me thank you. I did this morning, but I want to do it again in your individual capacity, whatever it might be, as a council delegate, as an executive director of a society, as a board member, as a member of staff, my wonderful colleagues, as a reviewer, as John Paul just mentioned, as a fellow, a scholar, a participant in our many initiatives, as a supporter, as a friend, as a local Philadelphian who found themselves pulled in. If there's anyone here on this flight, we welcome you. I really am happy and honored to speak to you today. Some years ago now, more years than I like to remember, to be honest with you, when I think about how long it's been since I've been in a classroom, I used to assign an exercise to my students on the first day of class, on the first day that each class met. I would ask the students to imagine and then describe. We weren't allowed to show images or play anything, any video, but I would ask the students to imagine and describe an artwork that to them embodied the ideal class. So I wanted to get them to think about what a good class was about and what their participation and engagement in it might look like and what the whole collective enterprise would be. And some of them would choose a symphony, kind of an obvious choice in some way, and some chose a jazz performance of some kind or improv theater, practice dear to the heart of our chief of staff, Kelly Buttermore. That would come up. And I used to suggest often, not always, sculpture by Anthony Caro. Anthony Caro is a British artist, not a huge personal favorite of mine, I have to say, but a prominent artist through most of the last half of the 20th century. He's best known for work that connects curved or straight steel extensions or tubes to eye bars or steel cutouts. He likes to paint them, he died not long ago, he liked to paint them often in bright primary colors, red or blue, and he would balance the whole arrangement of eye bar, steel tube or extension or plate on the ground. And this was radical in the 60s, no pedestal, it's just the work sat right on the ground. And I chose him as my artistic instantiation of a good class because I felt his work, the best of his works, exhibited a dynamic tension and balance, and they drew our attention, like they still draw our attention, to the relation of each element one to the other. And these things, it seemed to me, the dynamic tension, balance, sometimes a little unsteadiness, sometimes a solidity, depending on the piece, but especially that attention to relationality, it seemed to me that's the essence of a really good class. So when I think of what form ACLS might take, if it were an artwork. So I'll let you think about that imaginative question for a moment. I find myself once again thinking of Anthony Caro works. As a federation of societies and a host of networks, we too comprise a number of different elements and initiatives, both bold, as Caro's sculptures are often painted, and also grounded, really sitting right on the ground, at least we hope. And we also seek to find the right balance among all those elements. A Caro sculpture, though, I think not only captures the dynamic tensions and issues of balance for us as an organization as we seek to hit the sweet spot among distributing our energies among our many projects and programs, but they also, these sculptures characterize the tension, the dynamic tensions that characterize higher education today and that we feel at ACLS as we go about our work. And a more prosaic way of putting this, if you're not an art fan and you can't think of my description of steel tubes and plates didn't mean anything to you, you can think of this in more prosaic terms as we walk a number of tightropes at ACLS. At ACLS, we avoid talking about the decline of the humanities and the social sciences, first because we don't want to reinforce a tired old narrative of crisis and emergency, and also because there are truly so many great things going on everywhere you look. And I'll name just 6. Significant research into historically understudied areas and the growing visibility of fields like disability studies and indigenous studies, to name just two, cram two into that first one there. You heard a little bit about these fields earlier today. Second, the growth of multimodal, transcultural, collaborative, and applied work. Someone mentioned earlier today the Institute for Practical Ethics at UC San Diego, a great example of this kind of effort. Third, interdisciplinary and applied programs that are drawing undergraduates, specifically like the Applied Humanities program at the University of Arizona, also mentioned earlier today and yesterday. Fourth, majors combining the sciences with the social sciences and the humanities, like those gathered in the report nicely named Branches from the Same Tree, which was published by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine a couple of years ago. Fifth, the exciting growth in general education programs like the Cornerstone Project at Purdue, which was funded and circulated, funded by the Teagle Foundation, and the Teagle Foundation's also doing great work in circulating knowledge about these efforts. Perhaps not for everyone, depending on the university, but these general education programs, as has been said again already today, can be enormously galvanizing kernels for action across all the span, the entire span of all the disciplines. And finally, the growing reach and the ambition and impact of public humanities programs like the ones Chair Shelley Lowe described in our conversation yesterday afternoon. So all these great things, but still, we can't ignore at the same time the migration of undergraduates to STEM fields and business-related fields and the decline of numbers in tenure-track jobs. So while we celebrate the success stories, we also try to inject a sense of urgency into our efforts to encourage and reward ambitious work in scholarship and in teaching and administration that promises to find broad readership for scholarship, to attract more students and majors, and advocate for our fields within universities and colleges where they need a lot of help. Well, speaking of traditional academic practice, and this is another dynamic tension we navigate, we deeply value, and I can't stress this enough, we deeply value curiosity-driven and highly specialized scholarship, and sometimes those are the same. The unpredictability and the free play of human curiosity is a crucial driver of understanding, and for us, it's a sine qua non. It's a without which nothing. That's really why we exist. But we also see at ACLS how rare and difficult it is to ask critical questions about how our research questions get formed and how they accrue value or lose value over time. As Peter Miller of the Bard Graduate Center, soon to take on the presidency of the American Academy at Rome, just announced, which is great news. He points out in the introduction to his short book, What is Research?, which is really the record of a conversation among scholars. He points out in his introduction that we spend globally, as a species, something like $1.25 trillion on research. He says there are about 164 million research works you can consult in the Library of Congress catalog. But, he says, if you look in the Library of Congress under the research-history, the history and analysis of research and scholarship, you'll find just over 40 items. So 40 items that give deep critical consideration to the historical arc of scholarly and scientific questions. I think Peter Miller is right on target when he suggests that we really need to think more critically about and give more time to thinking about the scholarship we're doing and valuing, partly because it advances familiar questions, and that's sometimes the right answer and it's sometimes not. So some questions that I bring to this area of thought are, for whom are we scholars doing our work? And are we accountable to anyone other than ourselves, and maybe potentially very small groups even within a group of community of scholars? Might we ask better critical questions of our work, or better scholarly questions? How do we define better in the first place? And who is the we who's doing the thinking? But I think we need to ask these critical questions more frequently. We need to do it in constructive and, above all, generous ways, to quote Kathleen Fitzpatrick's book, Generous Thinking. And At the same time, on the other side of the coin, those who want to advocate for traditional modes of scholarship also need, for their part, to avoid reacting defensively as though asking questions is equivalent to a negative attack. It's not. Again, I think of Anthony Caro, those arcs of steel and eye bars and slabs. So one more example. At ACLS, we don't want to be seen as partisan. We're not a partisan organization. We never will be. We believe in dialogue across difference. But we also see the attempts to erase, as we've talked about today, entire fields of study in states like Florida, the beginning of the end of tenure in Texas, what one professor at the University of Michigan recently in the Chronicle called the maliciously ludicrous bans on teaching and studying divisive concepts, so-called, in states like Georgia and Tennessee. The growing challenges to academic freedom across the country demand that organizations like ACLS avoid party politics, but boldly advocate on behalf of dialogue and the free exchange of ideas and against censorship. And I hope you all stay tuned for a new statement of principles on this topic that we hope will appear after our further work with the board on the ACLS website this summer. One thing we're absolutely certain of at ACLS is the value of humanistic scholarship, broadly defined, and we talked about some of the definition work going on in the organization and by scholars earlier today. As I wrote in the January 2023 ACLS community newsletter, which I hope is regular reading for all of you in this audience, humanistic scholars make visible that which would otherwise remain invisible. They nourish, we nourish, care for things and people unknown to us before. If we're to understand the wicked problems of the world, let alone solve them, we must create more space for humanistic study and teaching. And no single organization could possibly achieve this ambitious goal alone of creating this space. Working in collaboration with others, ACLS is ideally placed to strengthen the humanities and social sciences, and by doing so, help make academia a better profession where everyone can flourish. We hold a valuable and interesting spot in American higher ed as a hub of exchange among learned societies, schools, scholars, and as you heard today, groups like Imagining America and Bringing Theory to Practice. This ability to connect and convene people is all the more valuable at a time when the forces of competition and financial austerity encourage isolation, both of institutions and of individuals. We're so fortunate to have the respect and visibility that our grant making gives us, which does good in and of itself, as you've just heard from John Paul and Dina and our scholars panel before that, as we seek to encourage new directions and to support emerging and underrepresented scholars. Our work with the learned societies and with our member universities allows us to circulate ideas and action plans that improve the professional experiences, especially of doctoral students and scholars, faculty inside universities, but also scholars working outside. Our good relations with other organizations like the National Humanities Alliance, as John Paul just mentioned, help us advocate for scholarship and its value in the world through public events and increasingly research and advocacy. So a few thoughts then, before I close, on our first strategic priorities and where we are on them. They're guiding our work through the end of 2024. We've just begun taking the first steps towards planning the planning process of the next strategic priorities, which will kick in at the end of 2024. But in those first strategic priorities, which we announced just as the pandemic began in March 2020, we stated our commitment to future-proofing. We didn't use that word, but it's one way of summarizing it, to future-proofing humanistic scholarship by strengthening academic infrastructure and solving problems together in our several networks of societies and institutions. Most of our sustainable achievement in this area has taken place through convenings and workshops. You've heard something about that already. They all tackle problems or weak points at the level of the academic system, transcending individual institutions or fields of study. And to quote our second strategic priority, the literal words we used, we are solving problems together, at least trying our best to do so. So here are a few of those questions and our answers. And I thought of this part of my report to you as a verbal version of, and reinforcement of some things you've already heard, but also that information table with its lists of programs outside. Because we are doing a lot these days, as John Paul and Dina have said, and I think it's helpful to pull it together and describe it in what we hope is a coherent way that makes sense to you and gets you excited. So how can we get more humanists into academic administration to help fight the good fight in the offices of dean or provost? And how can we help equip these administrators and others like them to humanize administrative processes and advocate effectively for our fields? The Luce Foundation funded design workshop for a new academy created the platform for the Leadership Institute for a New Academy, or LENA, funded by the Mellon Foundation, which this year is bringing together over 60 deans online and in summer institutes to share strategies and build sustainable networks of mutual support. We've begun circulating a quarterly newsletter on new academy initiatives, and Program Officer Heather Hewitt and Research Associate Trevine Harris, who's based at the University of Pittsburgh, have produced an ACLS guide designed for beginning doctoral students, designed for them to read even before they start PhD programs. It's also designed for the faculty who teach them. It's really a collection of best practices on doctoral education, and you can read it on the table outside. It's in its examination copy stage. At the LENA meetings in New York this summer, we will circulate that document and a number of other what we call blueprints for change, models of curricular or programmatic or research or administrative practice that show the most promise for securing the humanities and the social sciences for the future. Next question, and not all my answers are as long as the one I just gave. How can we continue the work of legitimating and preserving digital scholarship in the service of field building and strengthen understudied areas of scholarship in the digital realm? Our Commission for Fostering and Sustaining Diverse Digital Scholarship is answering those questions, and they'll make their work public in the coming year. And I'll leave it at that, so stay tuned. Third, how can we advance equity and a sense of belonging across all fields and areas of study? Senior Program Director Jovan Bickerstaff, who leads the Intention Foundry, asked Chair Lowe yesterday how we move from inviting more and different people to the table, as she put it, to empowering more and different people actually to set the agenda and design solutions. The Intention Foundry and the society-specific projects that the Foundry incubates, which Jovan leads, does just that by empowering scholars of color, most of them emerging scholars, to set the agenda and design solutions in collaboration with Learned Society executive directors. How can we ensure better access to fellowships and grants? You've just heard from John Paul about our new HBCU faculty fellowship, and I want to thank him and Program Officer Derisa Grant. This is our latest effort on this front. We won't stop here, but I want to reiterate John Paul's expression of thanks to the many HBCU faculty and administrators who really helped design this program by offering us crucial guidance. We visited Morgan State University not long ago, and I was asked after John Paul presented the new program to a mix of faculty and administrators, why, she said, why focus on HBCUs? I mean, it was a friendly question. She said, just explain your reasoning. Why us? And I said, and I relied here very heavily on what I've learned from Professor Jelani Favors, whom you heard earlier from North Carolina A&T, their historical underfunding, yet overachieving given the contributions of HBCU faculty and students to scholarship and society. That's one reason. The crucial role HBCUs played and play now in accelerating social and political change. The ongoing impact and legacy of structural racism, which creates gaps in networking and access in the brutal hierarchy, and sometimes it feels awfully brutal in American higher education. We're excited about that program. How can we assist the movement to ensure free access to scholarly knowledge? This is another one I'll leave as a tantalizing, stay tuned message. The Arcadia Open Books Prize, just announced yesterday, is our latest effort, and we look forward to announcing the awards in due course. Very excited and grateful to Arcadia for making that possible. Some of this work builds directly on earlier projects at ACLS. These are new efforts. But I want to close by but with two final points. First, that effective action for change along the lines that we're advocating for and working on requires accurate assessments of current conditions. This scarcity of reliable facts about, say, doctoral outcomes and other matters means, as David Scobie pointed out earlier today, that the humanities and social sciences themselves must become the object of well-designed research programs that identify strengths and weaknesses. We already benefit from the humanities indicators at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences that have a table out in the lobby, led by Rob Townsend and his colleagues. We'll soon benefit, I know, from the MLA's new research programs. ACLS is lucky to have strong allies doing research into current conditions. And this year, we took steps to better position ACLS as a known resource for research into selected elements of humanistic scholarship and practice. Program Officer Jessica Taylor, until recently a staffer at Humanities Indicators, a good sign of networks working well, is conducting research on the outcomes of the Mellon Public Fellows Program. Program Officer Sarah McKee, who ran digital publishing in the humanities, a Mellon-sponsored program at Emory University, now working for us, is focusing on innovation in the area of open publishing. The point of gaining knowledge is to circulate it. And that's my last point. You are all key nodes in that circulation, whatever your society, whatever your field, your organization, or your school. And our networks are growing. Since 2019, we've been expanding our membership groups, starting with the Council itself. Over the past few years, we've welcomed the Association for the Study of African American Life and History and the National Women's Studies Association, as well as Italian Studies and the Philosophy of Science Association. You vote, I think, on the membership of the Society for the Social Studies of Science today. With the help of our new board working group on societies, we continue to seek out conversation with other vibrant scholarly communities, both in emerging areas of study and long-established fields, who would benefit from membership. And we know ourselves that we would benefit from their presence. We want to make sure it's a two-way street. And we're mindful that some groups already belong to our current member societies, so rest assured we move cautiously and consultatively. But our list of member societies sends a strong public message about our identity and values, so we're committed to inclusive expansion. We are in a spasmodic moment in American society and higher education. We see the erosion in the norms of democratic politics, respect for others, freedom of speech, and the free quest of knowledge. I hope this overview of ACLS activities, following on the reports of my two colleagues, demonstrates our commitment at once to grand principles and great big projects, and also to the hard incremental work of the everyday. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to lead ACLS. It's an honor and really a pleasure, as I hope you can see from the way we interact with one another, to be working with smart colleagues on worthy goals and key issues in higher education. So I welcome, I'm seeing now for maybe 3 or 4 minutes of questions, brief ones, and I ask, though, last request, that you take what you learn here today back home with you and spread it around. We are stronger together. So thank you for your attention.